My name is Kryn. It was a Saturday morning in early October, and I was in my garden, planting lavender along the stone path I'd painstakingly built. The sound of tires crunching on the freshly laid gravel driveway caught my attention. I stood up, brushed the dirt from my knees, and watched as a sleek, black Bentley rolled to a stop in front of my home, now known as Riverstone Manor. Out stepped my father, Mr. Henry Blackwood. He got out slowly, and then just stood there. I watched his face transform in a way I'd never seen before. His mouth slightly opened, and his eyes roamed from the restored wraparound porch with its elegant iron railings and hanging baskets of flowers, up to the freshly painted exterior, across to the renovated stable that I'd turned into a trendy event space, and then out to the well-manicured grounds, the neatly trimmed lawns, the stone-lined flower beds, and the gravel paths bordered by wildflowers. He stood there in silence for what felt like an eternity. I let him take it all in. I didn't move towards him, I didn't wave. I just watched him as he beheld the results of my hard work. Finally, he walked towards me. He was smiling, but it was a far cry from the triumphant smile he'd given my brother, Leo, on that fateful day years ago. This smile was hesitant, unsure. Kryn, he said, looking back at the house as if he couldn't tear his eyes away, this is extraordinary. Thank you, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He then took a slow stroll around the property, bombarding me with questions about the renovation, the stable conversion, and the garden design. I answered each question calmly and matter-of-factly. I wasn't cold, but I wasn't overly warm either. I was simply a woman showing a visitor around her well-earned property. Then, he dropped the bombshell. I've been talking to Leo. He's left his penthouse in Miami. The high-end lifestyle got too expensive, and some of his business deals went south. The family thinks it might be a good idea for him to come up here for a while. Maybe take over managing this place. You've done the hard work, Kryn. Now Leo can step in and take it from here. You can go back to your job in Chicago. He said it with a smile, as if he was sharing good news. He gave me 3 days to think it over and informed me that Leo would be ready to move in the following weekend. I looked at him for a long time. Then, I smiled. It wasn't a nervous or polite smile, it was a genuine one. I'd been waiting for this moment without even realizing it. Dad, I said, I think you should know something before you finish that thought. I led him to the side porch, opened my laptop on the outdoor table, and showed him the business registration for Riverstone Manor events and retreats, filed 18 months ago. I presented him with the rental agreement I'd signed with a corporate event planning company that had already booked the stable for 15 events the next year. I showed him the financial records of the property's first full season of short-term rentals, the projected earnings for the next year, and the recent appraisal value from a commercial property expert. The figures made him go deathly silent. I then delivered the final blow. 6 months ago, a luxury travel magazine had featured Riverstone Manor. A high-end resort chain had reached out after reading the article, and we were in the final stages of negotiating a franchise agreement that would place Riverstone Manor among a select collection of premium destinations in the Midwest. My lawyer had reviewed the contract, and my accountant had vetted the projections. Everything was set in motion. My father sat down in one of the porch chairs without an invitation. He stared out at the property for a while, then looked at me and said softly, I didn't think you'd achieve all this. I replied just as quietly, I know you didn't. That was the end of our conversation. There was nothing more to say. 3 days later, on the morning he'd said Leo would arrive with a moving truck, I was sitting on my porch, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise over my fields. I received a text from my father. It simply read, Leo isn't coming. This is yours. I'm sorry. I read the message once, placed my phone face down on the table, and listened to the birds chirping in the lavender for a while. Let me take you back to the beginning. I was 28 years old when I realized my father no longer saw me as his daughter but as the inferior child. We were in the grand living room of our family mansion in Connecticut. My brother, Leo, was being handed the keys to a lavish penthouse in Miami. It had floor-to-the-ceiling windows, a private infinity pool on the rooftop, and all the amenities one could dream of. My father clapped Leo on the back as if he'd won the lottery. His booming laugh, which used to make me feel safe as a child, now made my stomach churn. Then, he turned to me. Still smiling, he slid a single, rusty key across the dining table and said, "There's a property upstate. An old farmstead. It's yours." He said it as if he were giving me a consolation prize. My mother continued to read her newspaper without a glance my way. Leo smirked at his phone. I just stood there, holding that key, feeling the weight of what it meant. I'd always been the afterthought, the daughter who didn't fit my father's vision for his legacy. The following weekend, I drove up to the property alone. What I found was a far cry from a house. It was a dilapidated mess. The porch was on the verge of collapse, as if it had given up on standing. Several windows were shattered, and the kitchen ceiling had a massive water stain. The heating system looked like it hadn't worked in decades, and the back wall of the stable had crumbled into the field. My father knew exactly what he was giving me. He'd visited the place. This wasn't an accident, it was a message. I sat in my car for about 20 minutes in the gravel driveway, looking at the crumbling wreck. I made a decision then. I wasn't going to call him in tears. I wasn't going to sell it for a pittance to a developer. And I definitely wasn't going to let him be right about me. I got out of the car, climbed the creaking porch steps, pushed open the warped front door, and said out loud to no one, "Okay, let's do this." What my father didn't know was that I'd spent the previous 5 years working as a project manager for a large-scale construction firm in Chicago. I knew contractors inside out, was well-versed in permits, and could read a structural report like a book. I could negotiate material costs and manage project timelines with ease. He thought the broken farmstead would break me, but he had no idea he'd handed me an opportunity. The first 3 months were incredibly tough. I was driving up every weekend, sleeping in a sleeping bag on an air mattress in the one room that wasn't drafty, and living on fast food. I poured every cent of my savings into foundation repairs and a new roof. My friend, Lily, who I'd known since high school, drove up twice to bring me coffee and talk me out of giving up when the second contractor disappeared in the middle of the job. There were nights when I sat on the sagging porch in the dark, questioning everything. But I could see the potential in the place. Beneath the decay and neglect, there was beautiful, original hardwood flooring, hand-built stone walls in the kitchen, and a fireplace hearth made of smooth river rocks that took my breath away when I first cleaned it. This place hadn't been abandoned because it was worthless, it had been abandoned because no one had cared enough to look closely. I knew that feeling all too well. By the 8th month, the main structure was stable. By the 14th month, I'd restored 3 bedrooms, rebuilt the kitchen from scratch, installed a state-of-the-art heating system, and replaced all the windows. By the 18th month, Riverstone Manor was a sight to behold. People would slow down their cars as they drove past on the county road. Now, Riverstone Manor is fully mine. Leo is still trying to get his life back on track, and I still plant lavender on Saturday mornings. But now, I do it in a garden that belongs to a woman who was never the lesser child. My father just never bothered to look closely enough. If my story has inspired you, hit that subscribe button right away. Every week, we bring you real stories of women who were underestimated but came back stronger than anyone could have imagined. You don't want to miss what's coming next.